Welcome to Trailer Rewind, a monthly conversation about movies you may have missed in theaters that are now available to watch at home on streaming services. Every month, we dig into the archives and watch a film that was one of the trailer picks on a Saturday matinee episode. You can get access to the SatMat shows at patreon.com/thenextreel. It's a great way to get an overview of everything we do here at The Next Reel.
Who is it?
No ID, no idea.
I know your whole story.
Placing our agent undercover should look right enough next to our guy.
If we do this, we accept the consequences. Do you love me?
You know I do.
JJ, today we're talking about Destroyer. This was actually my pick from October 20th, 2018.
Wait a minute. Is this your first pick? No, this is your second, right?
This is where, where I get to seed things into the SatMat. And I will fully admit, those are things where I'm like, JJ and I are going to want to talk about this. That's why I'm picking this trailer, because I can't wait to talk about this one.
What was the other one? It was just recent. We're just like now caught up, so we can use your seeds. Your seeds have now become the Trailer Rewind. We're sowing the seeds of Steve. I'd
have to dig back in. Maybe it was Jonathan.
Could be. That might be it. Yeah.
That might be it. Or was it Hostiles? I don't. I sure
hope it wasn't Hostiles. But Okay. So this one is yours.
This is my pick. Yeah.
How did you? How did you come across it?
So that was October. Today's August 13th, and I watched this on Hulu. So right now, as of August 13th, this is available streaming on Hulu.
I rented it on Vudu, so it's also available in those paid channels as well.
Yes, but I like to tell people where to get it for free. Well, Hulu's not really free; it's subscription based. So you just auto pay, and then it's like it's free because you don't actually see the money leaving your account.
It's very irresponsible to tell listeners. You don't. It's out of sight. It's out of mind. It doesn't exist.
That's right. There it goes. What's interesting about this one is Destroyer was released into theaters on December 25th, 2018.
What?
This
on
is
Christmas?
Not like on Christmas. Yes, but it was that limited release on 3 screens. This is let's get it in theaters at the end of the year, so of course it's eligible for awards.
Oh my gosh! I want to know what 3 screens it was.
Well, probably 2 in LA and probably 1 in New York. Typically,
that's
usually how it goes. And then it slowly expanded, but it was only up to 235 screens in February. That was the maximum exposure on this. Was 235 screens, not a lot.
Yep.
And then it left theaters in March, and it had only made $1.5 million domestically and another $2 million internationally. And I think a lot of that was Australia.
Okay.
Nicole Kidman, of course, will always be a box office draw in Australia. Yeah. And then
I would think she is here too. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So it hit digital streaming services on April 9th and then Blu-ray and DVD 2 weeks later. And this was really promoted as an Oscar vehicle for Nicole Kidman. It just didn't make that connection with audiences.
Oh man, I watched the trailer before this, and it was like literally every quote was Nicole Kidman is this, Nicole Kidman is that. This is Nicole Kidman's greatest thing. It didn't talk about anything else but Nicole Kidman. No. This was it's like they made this movie as Oscar-tron for Nicole Kidman.
Oh, exactly. But back in that fall, we also had Nicole Kidman in Aquaman and Nicole Kidman in, the other one where she's the mom with Lucas Hedges, and she's the mom. Boy Erased, where he's the son of like the Baptist minister, and he's he comes out as gay, and like he goes to the gay therapy camp. Yeah, so I don't know if that was the Nicole Kidman people wanted. Like, there's the fun Nicole Kidman in Aquaman, or the traditional, it's Nicole Kidman as mom. That's something we're more interested in versus Nicole Kidman in gritty cop drama with, really sort of transformative makeup on her and not the Nicole Kidman we're used to seeing. And maybe
or intense mom drama. I wonder if her team just sent like a for your consideration ad and then just included all 3. They're like, she can do it all.
She can do it all.
Don't pick one. Just nominate her is what they were doing. I don't know.
I think that may have been the case. But this one got lost in the shuffle somewhere.
Totally.
Yeah. So this trailer, back in October, I always go back and listen to that Saturday matinee episode to look at what we were saying about the trailer. So what's hilarious about this SatMat from October 20th, it took us a good, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes to get into things because Pete and I had a great conversation. I don't know where Andy was, but Pete and I had a great conversation about a lot of fun things. We talked about the Rocky Horror Picture Show home indoctrination kit that I was putting it together last fall.
Wait, is that a way to show up so you can show up and you don't have to say you're a virgin? You can do it at home and then you don't have to get hazed when you actually go? Because that could actually get me to see that movie. I'm terrified of the hazing. So is that what you're talking about? Because that sounds amazing.
You're going to have to go back to that episode and find out a little bit more.
All right.
And we also talked about a really entertaining Twitter thread that actually was turned into a movie.
Cool.
Because, so there's some really interesting discussions that I had completely forgotten about from last fall. So it was a nice trip down memory lane.
Nice.
But by the time we got to talking about the trailer, the thing that I really focused on was this cast. Because in addition to Nicole Kidman, you've got Bradley Whitford, you've got Sebastian Stan, and for those, fans of Orphan Black, if you've seen that, you've got Tatiana Maslany as well.
Is that Shelby? Is that the kid?
No, not Shelby. That is, I'm horrible with names. The other Petra. There we go. Yes, that's Petra. Yes. And then, of course, we talked about the sort of physical transformation of Nicole Kidman. But the other piece that intrigued me was that director Karen Kusama had just directed The Invitation back in 2015, which is a film I know you will never see.
Right.
But it was
thinking about it.
She had done a few movies. I think one of her first ones was back in the 90s, Girl Fight with Michelle Rodriguez. But then she did a couple of things and then did Aeon Flux with Charlize Theron, and then stopped doing film and was on TV for about a decade, doing all kinds of great shows in TV. The Invitation was her return to the big screen, and seeing how much I enjoyed that film and just the tension, I was really looking forward to seeing what she could do with more of a cop undercover crime drama. So that's what really drew me to this trailer to start us off.
That makes sense. And you would think that with all that, and especially with what they're doing with this one, that it would definitely attract people.
That's what the thought was. So
sure,
that's why I was really hyped about this trailer. And now looking back at it, it's still, we'll get into that about what the expectations were.
I'm excited to talk about it because I think I see some swings. I don't know if there may be some hits and some misses in this one to talk about. So it's good.
JJ, we usually wait until the end to talk about where a film lands on our flick chart.
Yeah.
But I'm going to cheat a little bit today, and I'm going to tell you that for me, it's right next to Black Klansman on my list. And you're probably thinking, why am I telling you this now? Well, because right after we're done recording, you could head straight over to Audible and download Black Klansman, read by author Ron Stallworth. He was the first black detective in the history of Colorado Springs Police Department. It was made into that Spike Lee film. Nice. It's nearly 6 hours of true undercover drama. And our listeners out there can try out Audible at audibletrial.com/thenextreel. It's really quick and easy to sign up. You can download Black Klansman and keep it, or another book that you've been wanting to read. You can cancel if you don't like it, but I really think you're going to enjoy it. Black Klansman, great, true crime drama story. Reminded me of Destroyer, thinking about how much that whole behind the scenes procedural piece of drama. Given that this is hyped as this whole Oscar, I hate to say Oscar bait, but that's, when you sort of release this type of movie on a certain date with, that type of release schedule in 3 theaters on Christmas Day, everybody knows you're positioning for Oscar nominations. Do you have any opinions on why it fell short? Why it didn't live up to that hype? Is it an uneven film? What were your general reaction to this one?
Well, there's so much. And I think, Oscar bait is fair because that's kind of what that's the idea that they're circling around with all this promotion and whatnot. But yeah, I think when you watch this movie, you feel like it's more of an Oscar appetizer. And, knowing what you've talked about here, learning about the fact that they released it on Christmas Day, it really seems like a miss when you think about the content. I mean, I understand that big movies come out on Christmas Day. I understand the idea that they're trying to prep for the Oscars and get it out before the year ends, but the content is heavy. I mean, it's super intense and it's dramatic and there's a lot there. all the promotion about Nicole Kidman is potentially valid. She does some really heavy lifting in this movie. And I don't have a too positive or too negative opinion about Nicole Kidman, so I get to watch it somewhat objectively in that respect. And she does some great stuff. It's really interesting to see a lot of it. And then there's a lot of creative camera work. There's a lot of interesting direction. I like the way the story is told in a very surprising way when we get into some of what we want to spoil about this movie. But in general, it just feels really kind of heavy. And until you get to the turns of the story, it just feels a lot just intense drama without a whole lot of interesting lead up. The whole movie is this one intense negative pace, and that's really hard to be released on Christmas Day. I was shocked to hear that. So again, I was happy with some of the creativity and the art that was shown in terms of filmmaking with this. I think it's an intense and it's a dramatic story. I understand why people would think that this would be an Oscar-worthy performance, but I don't. It's such a heavy movie, and we've watched some heavy ones as a part of Trailer Rewind. It goes into that category for me. It follows along the lines of something like Hostiles, or something along the line of Lean on Pete, where you're just going to be beset by negativity throughout this movie. So you have to really enjoy tragedy or drama to get into this movie.
See, I brought you back after the summer hiatus. Something uplifting, right? We'll set the bar here. Planted the seed. We can only go up from here. You know, if we start with this is our baseline for the second half of the year, we can only go up from here. And I agree. I don't want to say it pummels you, but it is really heavy.
Yeah.
The story, and just from the trailers, you see that the character that Nicole's playing, Erin, she is a, aged, weathered person beaten up by life. So we know this is not going to be
a zombie. She looks like a zombie. And I understand the transformation and whatnot and why they're trying to do that. But it was the makeup job on her was so thick and crusty. Gosh, I don't even like that I'm using those adjectives. It was distracting in that I was like, is she undead? Is there? Quite possibly that's what they were trying to get across. But for me, it was hard to watch because she was so intensely weathered.
I did find in my research a short, it's like about a minute and a half, but behind the scenes talking about the makeup, and I can include that in the show notes. And they talk about what they did to, sort of create that look, and the decisions they made to create that weathered look, about just little bits of latex here and there. And so it's not so much that it's heavy. I think it's they pulled some things so that her skin, as she's talking, it would just sort of pull and wrinkle in just the right way to give that sense of well-worn, weathered. And the director, Karen Kusama, said she wanted, Erin is a person who has been living out there in the California sun for a long time and not taking care of herself. And because we have these two time frames in the movie, they talk about how they set up, the young Nicole Kidman in our flashbacks, and they gave her some freckles that, as she then ages, almost look like sort of like precancerous just from being out in the sun so much, that she's got this, it makes her look unhealthy. Whereas you've got the young, fresh face, freckled Nicole Kidman, years, later, we see how this has taken its toll. And that was the general look and feel of what they were going for. And I think that they succeeded in that. It's not what you normally expect with Nicole Kidman.
No.
When we see her in the flashbacks, you're like, oh yeah, that's Nicole Kidman. I remember. Who's this old lady that's playing her in the rest of the movie? It's interesting transformation. So if we start talking about the story a little bit here. So we've got, as I mentioned, these flashbacks, and our main situation is we've got Erin, and we've got her in our current timeline, where she is clearly sort of lived life hard. Something's happened in her past. We open with her waking up in the car. And that's something that I noticed throughout, is a lot of scenes or sequences will start with her waking up in a car, or it just starts with her sitting in a car, as if she's gotten there and perhaps dozed off. For me, it created a little sense of disorientation at some points in terms of how much time has passed, or does she know where she is all the time? Give me a sense of sort of living in her shoes a little bit there of as we move from story point to story point.
Yeah, I thought it meant exactly in the sort of the ways that you're talking about. I thought it was meant to be somewhat of a mechanical vehicle for the flashback, because so much of the story is told in flashback. I think it meant to give us the disorientation that you're talking about, so that we can't necessarily place her in time, but we understand that she's reviewing the dramatic crises within her life.
Yes. And so we get a murder at the beginning that she's on the scene there, and she alludes to the fact that she may have known who has done this. It's clear that she's on sort of in opposition to a lot of the other police force, the way that she's treated by the other detectives and everything. It's clear she's sort of gone rogue. She's, playing by her own rules. And then we start to get flashbacks. And what I really appreciated about the structure is in her current investigation, she will encounter people from her past. And then we get flashbacks that show us either when she's first meeting these people or a key moment with that person in the past that reveals a little bit more about the gang that she's embedded in, or key points in the story of that case from her past.
Did they ever do that? Did they ever talk of someone and then flash back to them to introduce us? I don't remember that sort of synchronicity in the flashbacks. I felt like they were more random than that, or at least more artful in the way, and artful is the wrong word for that. Maybe I should say at least more disguised in the way that they were trying to tell the story. I felt like it was held back from us as opposed to spoon-feeding us on it.
I think maybe they embed it a little bit. So the first one is, she gets mailed the money that's, stained by the dye packs. And then she goes and finds, the guy at the FBI or whatever that had first sort of set her up with Chris to go undercover. And then he mentions that, one of the guys has been released from prison due to health concerns. And so as she's driving there, we then get a scene where she and Chris are sort of meeting with him.
They introduce us to that guy. You're right. I remember that now. Exactly.
And then the next, as we move along in the story, we get the next character who, she's told is he's working doing legal advice for people. And as she's waiting to meet him, we get the flashback to that really intense scene of the Russian roulette.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of layering of those pieces, so that we sort of parallel that progression in her current investigation with the story of Aaron and Chris being embedded with this gang and their time with them as they get to meet and know the members of that gang leading up to that heist back in her past.
Right.
I think maybe it's perhaps my second viewing where I noted it a little bit more because I was looking at the mechanics of things, but I do appreciate that it didn't seem too obvious to you that we were getting sort of parallel introductions to characters there. I want to talk a little bit about the flashback structure and how well that works in terms of storytelling, because we've got two stories to keep track of. And if we separate those and look at Aaron's current investigation on its own, and then just the story of Aaron and Chris embedded in the gang, do those two stories, and this I guess is getting into how well the film works in telling a story, or are these compelling stories, and perhaps why it didn't resonate with audiences? Are those stories too cliche? Did you think they worked? Were they fresh in terms of in the genre? How did you feel about those two stories?
It's a really good question. I think for me, this genre in general isn't necessarily my favorite. It's tough for me to do. So my perspective about it, like I think of a cop drama that we've watched that I really liked, which was Felony. And I feel like that kind of turned the traditional or the conventional cop drama idea on its head and really pointed at other issues about sort of what human nature is. I don't really get that from this story. So I think that to get into that, you asked whether it was cliche. I don't know if I would say it was cliche, but it really felt like that gritty cop drama to me. You have to buy in that Nicole Kidman, that Aaron Bell is this broken person, and then she's also really strong in her survival skills. I mean, that's kind of in her ability to survive whatever she's going through in her life. And you have to be along for the ride that you kind of like that anti-hero. Those are some things that are, the criminal as hero. She's both a cop and a criminal throughout this. And you've got to really like to play on those edges. I don't particularly, truck in those kind of genres when I'm choosing for myself. So I found that it wasn't super resonant with me. Now, if that means that it's cliche, that could be. But for me, from this sort of objective perspective, my thought was that if you like gritty cop dramas, if you like this sort of thing, if you maybe liked what's a show? It was the Shield that was like this, or what was the one before that with was it NYPD Blue? Going way back to the things that brought really cop grit to the small screen. If you like those kind of things, you might actually like this. This is a little bit more raw, and it kind of goes down that angle. But for me, it just didn't hit.
Yeah, the character for me as well. The character pieces didn't work really well. It helped move us to the point in the story where I got really engaged, which was I followed Erin, in our current timeline as she's working her way sort of down the chain to try to get to Silas, the leader of the gang who's apparently resurfaced, and she's got a vendetta against him. And so she's tracking players. She gets to Petra, who, there's the money drop from, Bradley Whitford, the attorney, to Petra. Petra's going to lead Erin to Silas. So she's following Petra thinking, okay, there's going to be a drop or she's going to somehow get to Silas. And then to me, it takes a really unexpected twist when Erin's following them and happens to stumble onto the fact that they're going in to rob a bank. Yeah. And to me, that's when the energy really hit, as soon as she sees them, load up, masks on, head into the bank, and she goes to the back of her car, calls it in, gets her weapon out, and goes in there, and you've got just two street cops show up. Like, aren't we going to wait for backup before we're going in? And then
her line is, "This is a firefight." The thing is, she just wants to kill Silas. Like that's my brain about it. And and so when you say the energy kicks up, I mean, that was a really tough scene for me, because I'm just thinking, all she wants is, this is a story about vengeance. This is a story about revenge. And it was really tough for me because it just didn't seem like it was rational. And of course, that's kind of, I'm looking for somewhat of a rational story in here, if it's not some sort of mind bender. And so that was tough for me. The energy there was wild and out of control for me. That's what hit me on it. But did you like that? Is that where you kind of picked up steam, you said?
Yeah, that's where I thought, this is what I'm expecting. And those are the types of things I like, where we get that. I mean, the character piece, all trying to, I'm introduced to the gang members, but to me, it's really about the dynamic of Erin and her quest for vengeance. And so we've got the firefight in the bank. We've got her actually capturing Petra, which I think was a very interesting insight into Erin of, I'm gonna chase her. I'm gonna hunt her down. I'm gonna throw her in the back of my trunk. I'm going to lie to other officers. Yeah. Oh no, she got away from me. She went that way. Basically kidnapping Petra tells me how committed she is to getting Silas. I mean, we've got a sense that, she's gone rogue, but this is the point where it's revealed nothing is going to stop her from getting Silas. That's, we see throughout that her partner is calling her, wanting to know what's going on, where she is. Because of the timeline, I had questions as to whether, her partner was still alive. Were these flashbacks? Were these memories?
Pairing. Yeah. Her and her partner.
Yes.
How did you pair those two up?
Truly an odd couple. Yes. You've got,
Yeah. It's like young, fresh-faced black cop mixed with old zombie Nicole Kidman. I'm like, who was the supervisor that said, yeah, you guys will work out? Like, I just don't get it. Anyway.
Well, and I don't know if that's the case of we've got to give her somebody stable that's going to ground her and keep her in line. Clearly, nobody's going to be able to accomplish that. So, because she is really off the rails at this point. And then back in our flashback, we've got the gang building up to a point where Erin overhears that they're going to go rob a bank, and it's Petra's dad has she overheard some information, and there's going to be all this money there, and that's where Chris and Erin have a really interesting conversation about how they're going to handle the situation. And to me, that's the real pivot in the story, because they're embedded here to prevent, this gang that's on the verge of, violent crime. And now they overhear that, hey, they're going to rob a bank. And Aaron sits down with Chris and asks him to commit to something that it's clear he's not comfortable with.
It's a bad idea.
I'm tired, Chris. I've spent my whole fucking life scrapping. Jealous, hungry, scared. I just want to spend one fucking day on the other side of that.
I know. That's me too. But this isn't the way.
Please. You gotta give me this, please. I need this. You want me to say it? I'll fucking say it. Do it for me. For us.
The turns, because they're told in flashback, there's two turns with the Sebastian Stan character that are really tough to buy into unless you're totally unless you're totally with the story, which is where they kind of fall in love as they're embedded, because we went through a whole scene earlier where they were practicing their lines to make sure that they seemed like they were in love, even though they were not. And then all of a sudden, because everything happened off screen, because it's in flashback, now all of a sudden they're in love. So we can take that, right? But then this piece too, where they're deciding how they want to get out because they're done with their deal, he being of the FBI and she being of some sort of local service. Or maybe she was FBI too at that point. I'm not even sure. But the point is, now part of what their pact is criminal. I mean, they're talking about taking some of the money with them too. And so that's where it kind of becomes confusing, because he's not okay with it, but they're agreeing to this. It just seems really, all this stuff happens off screen that brings us to this point with them. So it's really tough for us to understand, or tough for me as a viewer to buy into the changes that are happening with these characters, especially when all we're seeing in the non-flashback realm is Nicole being a zombie badass. So it's tough to really understand the arc of the character because of the way that they decided to tell the story.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have enough time with that relationship because all we get is what's in flashback, and we're only getting enough information there to reveal, here's who the gang members are. Here's this heist they're going to go on. We don't have enough time to really develop that relationship between Chris and Aaron to go from just, partners to falling in love to willing to trust each other to say, we're going to lie to our superiors on this. We're going to get our story straight on what we're going to tell everybody so that basically they can get out with the money. And they even talk about the fact of, we're going to get out, we're going to wait till this cools down. They've got a whole long-term plan for this. It's one of the pieces that I struggle with this movie. I still really enjoy it, but it's those pieces where I'm having to fill in a little bit more than I want to as an audience member. I mean, we do get the scene where she goes to the drugstore and we realize that, Erin's pregnant. So that, to me, that could be the other reason for her eagerness to get out of everything. I'm going to have a kid. I can't be embedded here undercover. I don't know that I want to, be in law enforcement anymore. If she and Chris can get out, have a family. Yeah.
I get that. I just don't get why they have to steal the money. Why did they take that turn too? Because now they're not going to have jobs. They can never be in law enforcement again. That's the thing, that we didn't see them turn to that aspect of it.
Well, at the beginning, she says she's tired of sort of scrapping to get by.
Oh, she does say
on
that.
Things.
You're right.
So she's a little worn out of like, I've been putting in my time and I feel like, she's owed something.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
So
that's what she says.
Then we get that heist, and that's where we get the reveal of where things go wrong with that. And there's a couple. I appreciated how things were built up. We early on with the Russian roulette scene, we see that Silas is. He messes with people's minds. He's, I don't want to say sinister, but he's slightly askew. He's one of these just, He
reminded me of Chris Hemsworth in Bad Times at the El Royale. Kind of this cult leader.
I haven't seen that yet.
Thing.
Okay.
Oh, you haven't?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I haven't seen that yet.
It's a fun and weird one too.
But so we get to the point where they're robbing the bank, and Silas tells the bank teller no dye packs. And then as soon as he's got the bags, as soon as he walks out, and the dye pack goes off, and he's just coated in that purple. He drops those bags. It's not going to end well. We've been set up for that. But then to see how Chris, I guess it's the redemption of his character. I mean, he was going along with Aaron's plan, and this is sort of his save the cat moment of. They also, said if things start to go wrong, plan is off.
We call it in.
We're going to call it in and all that. And that's what he does. And unfortunately, Chris is not a good shot, or Silas is a better shot.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think it's fast. And I think the true tragedy is that, I think it's not only the loss of Chris, but Aaron coming back to. They were in that position because of their plan, and she's the one that instigated that. So I get the sense that's where I start to get I understand the guilt that's driving this vengeance to get Silas. So that all comes to a head right sort of at the peak of our film here. We get the big reveal of everything that's been driving her up to this point, and what's going to push her to continue to pursue Silas. In between all of these things, we've got this subplot with her daughter Shelby.
Yeah,
who it's another attempt, I think, to develop character of what kind of mom is, as you say, zombie Nicole Kidman, who's got a teenage daughter who we now know is Chris's. That's her child from Chris. So. How is this kid going to turn out? Apparently not very, very good, because she's, dating an older guy, hanging out in bars with bar owners that apparently don't care if underage kids are in their bar, and gets in fights over, just a typical troublemaker teen. But we have late in the film here sort of this reconciliation scene between the two of them. The sort of heart-to-heart conversation. I think Aaron knows, she's getting close to Silas, doesn't know how that's going to end. And so this is her last opportunity to have this heart-to-heart as mother-daughter. How'd you feel about that scene?
I like that she released her daughter, and I like that her daughter told the story of the snow scene and things. I think when I say she released her, when she's saying, you're not the bad one, I'm the bad one. I really feel like I was emotionally connected to the point that I think that was something that Shelby needed to hear. But I like that. But in general, I just wasn't connected to their story. Their story felt really satellite to everything else that was going on, even though I feel like it was meant to be an indicator, some sort of indicative statement about how Aaron doesn't give up, her perseverance, her relentlessness.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wasn't as emotionally connected as I would have liked to be for that scene. How about you?
No, it's exactly where I am. I know how I should be feeling with that. And I always come back to, did I need more time with these characters, or were the scenes not leveraged to the best of their ability early on? Is it a matter of how things are edited together, the choice to tell things? We've got Aaron's flashback, and then we're weaving together Shelby and her boyfriend and that whole piece. And because we're moving back and forth through each of these, we don't get that flow of emotional build from one scene to the other, because there's so many other things that are happening in between. Because we've got, the first scene with Shelby in the bar with the guy, then they've got the first sit down talk that tries to happen, and the boyfriend takes Shelby away. Shelby in the hospital after getting in the fight. And then we've got Aaron trying to basically bribe the boyfriend to
leave.
To head back to Spokane. Or what? Spokane. Exactly. Yep. With the money from the heist.
Right.
Which she had hoped was going to be a lot more, I think, to allow her husband and Shelby to get out of there. But, again, it's been soiled by the dye pack, which she did not know. So her plan B is bribe the boyfriend to get out of there. So, yeah, to me, it serves its function in the story. It just lacks some of the emotional power I was hoping for in that. But it does give us that moment. It's sort of one of those writer moments of, I'm going to give a character a really interesting story to tell about Erin being the worst mother ever and taking her daughter camping and not being remotely prepared at all to go on this expedition.
Well, and they allude to the fact that she might have been high or drunk.
Oh,
the thing to leave it there, or that she was having trouble, whatever. But I think that story, and then when they bring it back to us at the end, as this is sort of her personal denouement of her life, I think it's meant to show the concept of that everyone is the protagonist in their own story. So as she was hearing how terrible that was, as Shelby gives her the story from Shelby's point of view of how terrible it was, and the sort of objective youth of saying, why are we here? We shouldn't be here. You see on Erin's face in her final moments, this thing of pride that she is the protector and that she is walking through any storm to get to where she needs to go, because that's actually the story. That's the story of the film, really, is that she would be willing to do anything to get her chosen goal. And so I think that was the thing of giving it to us, saying that her last moments were spent looking at the pride of her relentlessness to achieve what she's looking to achieve.
I couldn't say it better myself.
Cool.
Yeah.
So why is it called Destroyer?
I don't know why it's called Destroyer.
What a weird title. What the heck? She's not, I mean, just because she's a train wreck? Just because she's a hot mess?
Because it's not, I mean, she's not leaving like a path of destruction. I mean, she causes problems along the way, but it's not, with a title like You Destroyer, you think this is the case of she's going to go back and take out every single gang member, something like that, where she's like, I'm out here to get every single one of them because they've got dirt on me. And it's not, it's about the one, it's Silas. Is it about Silas being the destroyer of her relationship? I don't know.
Maybe it's a metaphor that destroyers are like, that have a singular focus. Oh, goodness. I don't know. It feels like a big miss in the title, because, and I don't know what I would name it differently. I would need time to think about that, but it's not that. That's not what the story is to me. There's something else here. If she's a mother, if she's a lover, of Chris in this backstory, if she's a spirit of vengeance, if it's all that's maybe the closest one. Why do you call it Destroyer? But gosh, no, that was a miss too.
Well, aside from, we've sort of covered the whole story, and now you usually will have an eye for some unique sort of cinematic moments, and you alluded to those early on. So I was wondering if there were anything particular that really stood out to you as working well in this film visually, because we do have a lot of interesting things that I noticed, and typically I'm not paying attention to a lot of these things because I'm focusing on story, themes, and things of that nature.
There is great and creative camera work throughout this film. There's lots of really interesting shots. They take a lot of time to express things visually in a very clever way. There's great motion control, some really interesting tracking shots that they take through the film. And I would love to come back and relate what was my favorite shot in the film, but it gets overshadowed by the last shot in the movie that I don't get, bothers the heck out of me. And I don't know why it's there, because she's, we see this, we go back to her time and time again, sort of waking up or feeling out or fading into the light underneath this bridge. And she's sick, which we never get told while she's sick, where I'm kind of fine with that. That's okay. She's about to perish. And the last shot is of these kids that are skateboarding underneath this bridge with her, and they're just doing tricks and all this stuff, and they sort of move off her. They imply her death. They move off of her, and then they go to these kids that are doing tricks with skateboards, and the guy pulls this jump. It's like an ollie, it's a jump, and then he's slamming the deck down on the ground. And that's the final shot of the film. And it feels like I give credit to all of the creativity and the different sort of camera that they were putting in here. But what the heck is that? There was no symbolism of skateboarding throughout the film. It was a weird sort of aside every time they went back to her in the car that the skateboarders were around. I mean, I would really like to hear if you have a creative take on this, because I was just distracted and confused. And again, it's one of those where we had all this great art, all this great visual art through the film, and then they end with this sort of punctuation on a poem that I couldn't reconcile.
So I've seen it twice.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
So I watched it once and then said, we need to talk about this one because I wanted to get your take on this. I think there was, interesting story to look into.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Because the opening, so that's where we open, is with Erin sort of parked on the underpass, and she's sitting in the car, and we see the kids with the skateboards. And if you listen, it's the clattering of the skateboard in the background the whole time, because he can't land the trick. He keeps trying to do this, kickflip ollie thing, and he can't land it. And that's the final shot, is he finally lands the trick.
But it's clear? Did you get that the first time you watched the movie?
No, I didn't. I didn't get it the first time.
Because
now, as far
it's like in the periphery. That's right. That's amazing if that's what it is, because that is okay. So it symbolizes her struggle and it symbolizes her completing her struggle. But goodness, that seems like such a stretch when there's nothing else pointing at that.
Well, and because there's so much, and here's where we get to spoiler alerts. So our opening shot is Erin, she goes out to the, she's called out to the scene of the crime or whatever, but there's the dead body. We see the 3, tattoos on the back of the neck. And she says, I might know who did this. She goes back to her car. She's in the car. The kids are doing the skateboard tricks, and then cut to title, Destroyer. And then it's like Erin, walking into her office there at the police station and all of that. So editing tricks us into thinking this scene comes... It's sequential when it's not, so that we then get to and see what we thought was the beginning of the film.
Now that I love.
That first sequence is actually the end.
Right.
It's really interesting. I didn't note it until the second time, because the body that she sees, is shaved head, 3 dots in the back of the neck. And every time we see Chris undercover, Silas has long hair, but the shots we have of Chris undercover is shaved head, and we see he's getting the tattoo. So it's playing with our expectations a little bit, but yeah.
And I love that. I thought that whole red herring part of the story I thought was great.
It worked, because when we get to the end and then she's in the car, I'm like, oh, this is not. We started with the end at the beginning of this. As far as what's ailing Erin, when she's tracking down Petra and chases her into the restaurant, bakery, whatever, and they have their fight. Petra lays into her a couple of really solid kicks to the ribs.
Boots.
And boots. And so that when Erin's sitting in the car, you can see she pulls up her shirt and her whole belly, abdomen side is just purple, bruised, like internal bleeding, which the coloring matches very closely to the purple dye in the past, which was, to me, was one of those nice creative echoes of, the corruption of that crime being the thing that's sort of eating at her from inside. And I'm getting
and it corrupted her too. That's cool.
Yes, exactly. So that's what takes her out at the end, is that fight with Petra, because we know
but it's Erin really the corruption, Steve. It's really the, I love that. I think that's great.
So that's where I take that whole end piece with that. And that's the part I think that brought me the most joy on the first viewing, is to see how the story is architected in such a way to trick us at the beginning, and that it works really well, that we see everything come together. We've got the flashbacks, we got our current story woven together, and it all comes to this head. And to me, those pieces all work sort of engineering wise. It's just missing a little bit of the heart. It intellectually, I appreciate everything that's going on. It just didn't get me in the gut, in the heart, the way that I had really hoped. And that's, the same thing with Nicole Kidman's performance. I enjoyed it. It's nothing where I thought, oh my gosh, this is the greatest performance I've ever seen. It is a very different type of character for her.
Yes.
Sometimes I think it's hard to act through the makeup, or that becomes a distraction. And
it did for me. Yeah.
And it's the lack of, the sequence of time to build those relationships. There are so many things that should work better than it did, and it just fell short. But I still really enjoy the experience of following this story with her. And perhaps it's because Andy and I had just watched maybe about a month ago. Andy had never seen To Live and Die in L.A., another story of, anti-hero cop, sort of going outside the box to do things, and with a tragic ending there. That this sort of echoed that. And To Live and Die in L.A., a much more, I don't want to say enjoyable film, but it works a little bit better. But to me, I appreciated a new take on that with a female character.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. She was so frail, and it was so intense that I just could not break out of my negativity that it brought to me. Again, if you like drama, drama and crime thrillers, this might be the movie for you.
So that, exactly. If you like your gritty cop dramas like To Live and Die in LA, this is going to be your type of film. If you're not for that darker side of the crime dramas,
let it go.
You let it go. You're not going to be missing out on a great classic that you're going to regret not seeing. I think people that are interested in this genre, I think you're going to take a nice journey. You're going to enjoy the story. I think it treads on familiar ground to a certain extent, but does a few fresh things. But yeah, it's not going to be for everyone. And if you want a happy ending, this is not the film for you. So where did it fall on your flick chart? I'm thinking you're in the bottom half of your flick chart.
It is. It's pretty low, but it was interesting because it came up against some movies that actually put it higher than I would have expected. So it's at 152, and that's out of a total of 209. So it's kind of in that bottom quarter. The interesting thing is that it's between Alien Covenant, below Alien Covenant, and above Pokemon Detective Pikachu. But that's not particularly interesting. It's 2 below The Congress, which is something we did here on Trailer Rewind, because I think The Congress is a little bit more creative. And then it's 3 above at 155, 999, which is where I think you really fall into the thing of that sort of gritty crime drama. I think Destroyer is better than 999. You probably don't.
Yes.
But you do. You do. Okay, good. Well, you like 999 more than I do.
I did, but not. Yeah. No,
so it's down there.
As I alluded to earlier, it's next to Black Klansman, which I really, really enjoyed. So it's interesting that you mentioned The Congress, because so Destroyer comes in at number 40 out of 438. So it's up there in my top 10%.
Oh wow.
So it's right below Black Klansman, right above Hostiles.
Yeah.
Which is also right above The Congress at 42. So I put Destroyer 2 spots above The Congress.
Yeah.
So it's right there in my top 10%. So
so that's interesting.
I was able to overcome the dark, dreary depression of this film to enjoy and appreciate I think a gritty cop drama.
And for all intents and purposes, most people can overcome that better than I can. So that's
fair. I think so. So for me, it comes in at a solid 4 stars.
Okay, wow, 4.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy it. Like I said, it lacks a little bit of the heart, but I don't need a lot of that to enjoy sort of a police procedural type of, interrogate the guys, work your way up the food chain to the final confrontation. And I really enjoyed both the bank heist sequences. I thought they're 2 very different. One is, frenetic action shootout. The other, we've got a little bit more of we've got a lot of slow motion going on there, drawing things out, slowing the time, and then the aftermath as the decisions that Aaron makes there worked really well for me. So that's why I've got it at 4 stars.
I put it down at 2.5. It's one of those movies that I thought was good, and I understand why it was good, but the point for me is it's not a movie for me. So I didn't want to pull it underneath halfway, but it's just not a movie that I'm going to want to see again.
JJ, as we say here on the next reel, after the movie ends, the conversation begins. I've enjoyed our nice little discussion of Destroyer, whatever that title means. So, and I want to thank our listeners out there. Again, you can find us out there. Give us a rating on iTunes. It helps people find us. Or you can also support us out there on Patreon and become a supporter. Gets you access to Discord, where there's always great conversations going on. Again, check out the Sat Mats, where everything comes to a head on a Sat Mat. That's where the trailer picks get made for Trailer Rewind. It's where we make our list based off the shows that Pete and Andy are discussing on the main show, and all kinds of conversations about what's going on in the world of movie news over there on the Sat Mats every Saturday, available for our Patreon supporters on Patreon. Well, JJ, there's one last word for me, but I need a few more words for you.
Yeah.
Hondo.